All right, everyone. Welcome once again to the Faces of Business. I am your host, Damon Pistolka, and I am incredibly excited for our guest today because we've got none other than John Graham here today from the Giraffe Heroes Project. John, thanks for being here today.
Well, I'm really glad to be here. Especially talking to a guy like you who has really cares about bringing some heart into the business world.
It is awesome. And, today we're going to be talking about ordinary people creating extraordinary change. John, I think you're one of those people, and I think you highlight a lot of those people. So let's get started. And tell us a little bit about your childhood and growing up in the Northwest. I mean, we didn't even realize this, but we live very close in the Northwest here of the United States. So let's hear about that to start with.
I tell people often that the whole bumper sticker of my life is I'm lucky to be alive. I grew up in Tacoma, as you say. It's very close to where you live. Tacoma being a small city in the Pacific Northwest, where nothing happens. And nothing happened in my family. We were not a family of adventurers. We were just a nice middle-class family. I had loving parents. And I was headed for that kind of a life. Then a weird thing happened. Three-quarters of the way through high school, I won an essay contest sponsored by a shipping company. And the prize was a trip as a passenger on a freighter. Now, in those days, freighters were freighters. There was no container ships. There was a big ship with about 50 or 60 really tough guys in it. And they swung the cargo in and out with big booms and stuff. And that's what it was. And anyway, each freighter took about a dozen passengers because some people really like that way of travel as opposed to cruise ships. So anyway, the shipping company calls me up and about 2 months before we were to sail, and I said, "We're really sorry, but we've miscounted. We don't have any space for you as a passenger, but you're a young man. We'll make you a member of the crew, and we'll give you like a really easy job, but we'll get you all the papers you need from the Coast Guard, and you can sail from us as a member of the crew on this freighter." Oh, wow! Of course, that's fantastic. Here I am in this little white bread community. Nothing ever happens, and I'm going to the Far East on a freighter.
Yeah.
Well, it wasn't quite that easy because my mother, who was a staunch Croatian Catholic, was a little bit afraid of I was still 16, if I was just about 17, go on something like that. So she goes to her parish priest and says, "Well, what should I do?" And the parish priest says, "Well, Madeline, it's he'll be alone with 50 or 60 really tough guys who I don't really think are much into religion. And I think what the Catholics call the near occasions of sin will be a little too near." So my mother takes that into account. So she's fighting with that against the other side of the equation, which is she really is a Croatian immigrant, and her brothers are all big, tough Croatian guys. And in Croatia, you become a real man. It's a real chest thumping, male-dominated society, and every young man needs to grow up. So she knew that this was an occasion for me to, quote, grow up versus near occasions of sin. Finally, she makes a decision to let me go. And I'm delighted. Of course, needless to say, I swear I will go nowhere near the near occasions of sin. I had every intention of going near them because I really wanted to grow up and I wanted to do all those things. And not only that, when I got on board the ship, these 50 or 60 guys were determined to teach me life lessons that they knew I would never learn in school. You can imagine what those life lessons were. And so off we went, and it was an incredible journey. And the seamen didn't fail. They taught me all those life lessons. And I saw the real color of the world, and I saw what I thought to be a real man. Now, my father, I loved him, but he was a real gentle guy. He got pushed around a lot, shoved around, never got to the top of his profession in the newspaper because he was just too soft. And I was really discouraged by that because I was getting pushed around by bullies and I needed a role model. And these seamen were a role model. They didn't take shit from anybody. Wow.
Yeah.
I mean, we got into a barroom brawl on the very first port of call in the southern Philippines. And it was a barroom brawl in a bar and a brothel in the southern Philippines. And I woke up the next morning and I said, what the hell happened? And Roy, who was my big protector, big black guy, weighed about 250 pounds. He said, hell, John, he says, you got completely drunk. We got you completely drunk. And then the fight started. And before the stevedores, the dock workers could kill you, we hauled you back to the ship. And if you're feeling bad now, it's called a hangover. It's your first hangover.
Oh my.
Anyway, so then there was Hong Kong and all kinds of stuff. And I came back from that trip completely changed. I wanted nothing more in my life than more adventures. And from that moment on, I sought those adventures and I found them. I mean, a year after that, I was hitchhiking in Europe, and I realized that there was a war going on in Algeria. The Russians were fighting the French. It was a colonial war. And I saw about it in the youth hostel in Zermatt, where I'd gone to climb the Matterhorn, which was the beginning of my mountain climbing experience. And so I said, what the hell, is a war going on only 300 miles away? I'd never been in a war before. Let's go there. So I hitchhiked down to Morocco, Algeria. I crossed into the border. There's still a war going on. And I put an American and shot. And sure enough, the rebels are friendly toward me. They even point guns at drivers and tell the driver to take me wherever I wanted to go. So I'm hitchhiking to the middle of a revolution. And it's a really exciting. There I am. And I had a terrific time. And I came back from that. And then it was just a never-ending pursuit of wild-ass adventures. I graduated from, I forgot to say, you mentioned this. I graduated from high school, went to college, and midway through my college career, I was climbing mountains with the Harvard Mountaineering Club, and we decided we would climb one of the last remaining big north faces on the planet, on what was then called Mount McKinley. Now it's called Denali. And it had never been climbed because it's so friggin' dangerous. Avalanches swept it once or twice a day. And if you were caught in an avalanche, you were dead. And it was a long climb, too. The Wickersham Wall, it was called, the North Wall, Wickersham Wall, was the second highest mountain wall in the world, higher than anything on Mount Everest.
Wow.
So it was like a huge achievement. And we did it. We climbed. We were the first people to make this ascent of the North Wall, and I have a whole lot of stories of cheating death 3 or 4 times, crevasse falls, avalanches, rock falls, drownings, you name it. We walked away from all of it. So now I'm pretty well sure that I'm indestructible, and not just what every teenager feels. Indestructible. Yeah. I'm 17, I'm 20, whatever. I sort of got it, that an article of faith that I was never going to die. None of my physical adventures would ever do me in. So I just kept taking them. Right out of college, I signed on with the Boston Globe and reported on a series of wars all the way across the Middle East and Asia. I mean, I was in the middle of the war in Laos, and then the war in Vietnam was just starting. I hitchhiked across Iran. I spent some time in an Iranian jail. It was a wild-ass adventure, and yet I walked away from all of it.
Yeah.
Ended up in Australia, but at that point, I had a degree in geology, and my idea was to become a geologist. And if not a geologist, then I was going to join the U.S. Foreign Service, because I was thinking, wait a minute, most important thing in my life is adventure. Most important thing in my life is this rush of adrenaline. So how can I do that and make a living? I'm not independently wealthy. So I looked around and I thought, well, geologist, yeah, but not really. But if I was a Foreign Service officer, a diplomat, they actually did interesting things, and some of them do really risky things. So I'll do that. I passed the exams the year before, so they gave me a job, and I joined the U.S. Foreign Service. And it did. My adventures didn't stop. Within 2 years, I was in the middle of the revolution in Libya, and I just loved it. I mean, other people at the embassy in Tripoli were freaking out because cars were burning in the streets and angry
Yeah.
mobs were throwing rocks and stuff. I loved it. I just loved it. I just loved it. And I found out that I was really good at being under pressure. And the State Department noticed that, kept promoting me, sent me to Vietnam. Really dangerous job up there near the DMZ, that divided the North and South Vietnam.
Yeah.
It was a really dangerous assignment. I mean, I came back with a heavy dose of what we now call PTSD, because I never knew whether I would survive the night or not. I was advisor to the mayor of Hue. More stories there. We can get into it later, but you got an hour. But anyway, so that I guess brings me up to your question. That's what, as a young man, that's who I was.
Yeah.
I didn't give a shit about anything except wild ass adventures.
And
the more dangerous, the better.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you glossed right over it. You went to Harvard and you got a degree in geology too along the way, and then you also went to a graduate studies at Stanford and got a master's degree in systems analysis. I mean, so you were just out traveling the world. You were getting a great education and starting out, and then the world travel, it seemed like, really helped to give you more of what you needed to do, because my goodness, before you were 25, you had been to more places in more dangerous situations and done more things than 10 normal people do.
Oh, maybe 150.
Maybe 100. Yeah. 10 adventurous people. But I mean, you were in the U.S. Foreign Service. You're a U.S. Foreign Service officer for 15 years. Like you said, you were in Libya when they did the revolution. You were in Vietnam, and you were part of the in the mid 70s. You were part of the NATO top secret nuclear planning group as well. I mean, dude, it is so cool to get to talk to you, because you've had life experience like so many don't.
I do, and it never stopped, and thank God it never stopped, because I still love adventure. I've since, as I hope we'll soon talk about, I managed to turn my life around so that I was cognizant and aware and responsible for more than just adrenaline rushes.
Yes.
But yeah, no, and one of the exciting things you say was I was a member of NATO's nuclear planning group, and my job and that of some other people was to turn Leningrad and Moscow into glass by targeting nuclear weapons that the NATO and the U.S. would throw at the then Soviet Union if they dared invade Western Europe. And so that was pretty exciting. Pretty stupid too. I mean, that we really thought that you could win a nuclear war. Yeah. If you reflect on it, no one's
no winner.
Nuclear war. No one's going to be left.
Yes, and that's the thing. But getting up to it, and again, in your fashion, thinking of your life and up until that, in 1980, you were aboard a burning cruise ship in a typhoon in the North Pacific that gave you a turning point in your life. Let's hear about that, and then we're going to talk about the Giraffe Heroes Project, because man, it only gets better.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we skipped over a few important things, and that is, I told you there was a turnaround in my life, and it took a long time. And the first part of it wasn't that cruise ship.
Okay.
It was a battle in Vietnam, a really vicious battle where I was responsible for people dying, and all of a sudden it got to me. I hated the war. I knew the war was lost. I thought the war was incredibly stupid. And yet I kept following my orders, doing all the stuff I was told to do. And now I was in the middle of this big battle. People were dying. I lived 8,000 miles away. I didn't give a shit about anything but myself. How could my life have become that shallow? That's the question I asked myself with this battle. How could my life have become that shallow? Because I'd spent so much time in the so-called third world. I'd seen huge amounts of poverty and suffering and hunger, and I
Yeah.
hadn't cared about it, man. I hadn't cared about it. All I cared about was myself, and that's why I felt so shallow. So I began to climb out of that hole. And when I went to Stanford, I didn't really give a damn about the degree I was getting. I went there just to try to climb out of this self-centered hole. And the degree kept me in Stanford because the State Department was trying to reward me for not getting killed in Vietnam. And I climbed in Yosemite and, did a lot of fun stuff, all trying to climb out of this hole. And I gradually began to. It was kind of like in the first part of my life, all those adventures, because I thought that I had to be a John Wayne type figure in order to be a real man. I had like nailed a piece of heavy plywood over my heart, and I had forgotten I had a heart. And then comes this battle in Vietnam, and I begin to say, wait a minute. I go to California. I got involved with what were then called encounter groups. There were discussion groups where you got together and spilled your guts as best you could. But it was really helpful to me in terms of psychotherapy, I guess, because I had a whole lot of other people saying, no, you're not who you say you are. You're not John Wayne. What you are, you're a really compassionate guy with a real heart, but you're afraid to show it. Oh, that was a revelation when I finally absorbed that truth. So I began to turn my life around, first of all, by being a better father and my own kids, and then beginning to establish real relationships with other people. And I gradually began to realize that I was really strong and tough and smart, but I've been using all that to make the world a worse place. Why didn't I use all those things to make the world a better place? So, except for some backslidings like the nuclear planning group, I gradually began to move up out of that hole. And I ended up at the United Nations, which was the high point of my diplomatic career, because I really had a chance. And I took it to start solving some problems that would bring more peace and justice, especially to the poor countries in the third world. And I say with a lot of pride that, for example, this is only one example, I helped end apartheid. I really did. The system of racial oppression in South Africa. So, I by that time I had really turned things around. I was an engine for good. At least that's the way I saw it anyway. And my life had totally changed. Then comes the ship. Okay, which you mentioned.
Yeah.
I leave the Foreign Service because there's no way that I'm going to be able to continue to be a force for good in the U.S. Foreign Service, especially not under the new president, Ronald Reagan, who really didn't care at all about the rest of the world. And so I left the Foreign Service, but then I panicked over money. I had a head full of ideals. I wanted to make the world a better place, but I didn't have any money. So some friend of mine says you can make a lot of money because you always had a good gift of gab, and you can give lectures on cruise ships. They pay absurdly well, and you get to travel. Hey, why not? So I signed on as a lecturer on a cruise ship, and I took my then 13-year-old daughter with me. I'm on this cruise ship that leaves from Vancouver, heading for a nice summer's trip, going around Southeast Asia and Japan. And 3 days off from Vancouver, we're about 150 miles off the coast of Alaska, heading out into the Pacific, and that ship catches fire and would eventually sink. And there's a real story there, but again, we only got an hour. But let me just tell you that it was an incredible. The Coast Guard still calls it the biggest and most successful air sea rescue ever. 550 people, and not only that, the ship was sinking. The ship was on fire, and it was in the middle of a typhoon. Typhoon Vernon hit us just as the ship was sinking, and so we were all put into lifeboats. And we were being bounced around on cockle shells of a lifeboat as a storm was coming on. And they rescued as many people as they could because helicopters were flying from the shore bases 150 miles. And then they would take 5 or 6 people up on the one at a time at the end of a cable and take them over to a big oil tanker that had answered the SOS and was standing by. It worked as fast as they could. I see Mallory taking off. Thank God my daughter's safe. But then there's only 8 of us left. Out of all these people, we're 8 of us left. The helicopter pilot signals that he can't come back because it's suicide to fly in a typhoon.
Yeah.
And so our only hope is that a Coast Guard cutter, which is a small ship,
Yep.
a Coast Guard cutter would find us, and it's a really dicey thing because in the middle of a storm, the visibility now is like a couple hundred yards, and not only that, it's getting dark, and we have no lights, we have no flare, we have no radio, we barely have any warm clothes. Several people don't even have life vests because they didn't tell us the ship was on fire. So some people were naively disarmed by that lie. So here we are. We're all dying out there. I've been in mountains enough to know what hypothermia looks like. We're all hypothermic. We're going to die of hypothermia in 5 or 6 hours. But the thing is, in 1 hour, it will be dark. Hard enough to find us in the daylight. But once it's dark with no lights, no flares, no radio, we're dead. They'll either find our corpses in the boat if we're not thrown out, or the little boat will sink or whatever. So we really have not 5 hours, but we have 1 hour.
Yes.
So I'm beginning to realize, oh man, this time out of all my near misses, it looks like this time
this is the one.
This is it. I mean, finally it's catching up to me after all these wild adventures. It's catching up to me. I'm going to die out here. And I got angry saying, wait a minute. Why should I die out here? I've turned my life around. I helped end apartheid. I'm doing a lot of good, saving a lot of lives from disease and poverty at the United Nations. And I'm being wiped out. I don't get it. I was talking to, quote, God, although I didn't.
Yes.
I wasn't a religious person. I was talking to let's call it the all that is.
Yes.
The entity. And my prayer turned into an angry bleat.
Yeah. Like, what the hell?
What the hell are you doing? What the hell are you doing? Here, I'm about to spend the rest of my life doing, quote, your work, right?
Yeah. Good stuff. Yeah.
And you're wiping me out. That makes no sense whatsoever. So anyway, I'm sitting there and I hear this voice. The other 7 guys didn't hear anything, of course, but I did. It surrounded me like I was surrounded by loudspeakers. And in so many words, the voice said, stop bullshitting me. You have all these ideals. Yes, you help end apartheid, but you get out of this one, you'll lecture on another cruise ship because it's a really nice life. And you don't have to worry about money anymore. And so you're not coming back to that life. You're going to lecture and make money and be just nothing. He says, look, if that's the choice you make out here, then you might as well die because the rest of your life won't be worth living. You'll have all these ideals, but you're not exercising them. So finio, you might as well die. On the other hand, if you make the opposite decision, if you decide to really commit yourself to a life of service, a life where you're really spending every ounce you have, every skill you have, trying to make the world a better place, well, perhaps we can arrange a different outcome.
Yes.
So I'm looking into this door, listening to this voice, and I just say, okay, I give up. I was totally beaten. My famous ego was just beaten.
Yeah.
And I leaned into the storm and I just said, yes, okay, I'll do it. And that instant, this Coast Guard cutter, the Boutwell, comes crashing through this wild storm. It would have cut us. It would have cut us in two had the lookout not seen us. I mean, it was like, oh man. And people listen to that story and they think, oh, John, that's a stupid story. I don't believe that. That is the truth. That's exactly what happened. That Coast Guard cutter came seconds after I had said yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
I kept my promise. I never looked back. I kept my promise.
Yeah. That's amazing. It's amazing how you had the experience of the worldwide experience, seeing so many good, bad, horrible, whatever you want to say, situations all the way around. And then that leading up to that started to think, I'm going to do this. I'm going to, live a life of service. And then this final push to think about, I mean, just your life alone up to that point, right?
Yeah.
Is a big deal. And getting to that realization where you said, I've got to get off. I've got to get out of the U.S. Foreign Service. I've got to start helping people. I can't do it here. but then you're out on the cruise ship lecturing, and that happens to push it over the edge. You're like, I'm all in. So is that what so that was like 1980. So in 1983 you started the Giraffe Heroes Project. That's correct?
No, not correct. I joined the Giraffe Heroes Project, but it was started, and I must correct you, by a woman who is now my wife, Ann Medlock, and I'll tell you a lot more about that when we get into the Giraffe Heroes.
Let's do that, because we're right there, and this is awesome, because the Giraffe Heroes Project is where you highlight these ordinary people sticking their necks out to do good things. Let's hear about that.
Well, I come back to New York, and like I say, I've always had a good gift of gab. So I thought, okay, I'll do my part by giving wonderful speeches about world peace. And I was so naive. I thought if I just gave these fabulous speeches, people would say, oh, John Graham, he's a saint. He's wonderful. I'm going to stop what I'm doing and work for world peace. That didn't happen. I learned very quickly that you can't change people's behavior just by preaching at them. It took something else. And then I noticed, I met a woman, a single mother living in New York City, working as a writer and editor. Her name was Ann Medlock. And she independently had gotten concerned about the fact that the world news, whether it was the New York Times or whatever, was all focused on bad news, rapes, pillages, fires, wars, whatever. But she knew there were good people out there. She had her eyes open, and no one was telling their stories. No one was telling the inspiring stories of the good people moving the world in better directions. And so she was going to start her own news service. So this single woman was going to challenge NBC, CBS, ABC,
awesome,
by starting the Giraffe Heroes Project. And she did. And she started by getting stories, and they weren't hard to find, of people who are sticking their necks out. That's where the name giraffe comes from, stick your neck out. And the metaphor was perfect. She found people sticking their necks out. She called them Giraffe Heroes. And she began to get their stories told. At first, given the technology of 1980s, she told them on vinyl record. She would take a tape recorder or get a recording from the Giraffe Hero of what their thoughts were, why they were doing what they were doing, etc., what they were doing. And then she would go and get a star of stage or screen, which wasn't hard to do because, after all, New York City, stage doors, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
She would get people like John Denver and other people who were stars at the time to do the voiceovers, and she would combine the voiceovers, mix them, I guess they call it, with the voice of the Giraffe Hero, and create little 3 or 4 minute segments. And she would put those on vinyl disc. And I suspect that half your audience, Damon, doesn't even know what a vinyl disc is. It's a flat piece of plastic. It goes round and round on a turntable. You put a needle down, sound comes out, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, so she would put these on vinyl disc and ship them out to radio stations. In the beginning, only small stations would play them, but they caught on. And soon she had a booming organization going. And by, I think, about 1985, she even got a nice feature on what she was doing in the New York Times, because people began to realize that storytelling was important. At first, I must say, to my great shame, that I thought storytelling, what she was doing, was lightweight, and that if you really wanted people to do good in the world, you had to preach at them to do good in the world. I was so wrong. Whew. I looked at what Ann was doing, and she was getting, and the Giraffe Heroes Project was getting more and more popular because she was doing what people had done for thousands of years. Neanderthals jumping around the campfire, or the troubadours of the Middle Ages.
Yep.
If you want to change people's behavior, you tell them stories. You don't preach at them. You tell them stories. Tell them the stories. You want a hero? Tell them the story of a hero. And Ann instinctively understood that. So that's what she was doing. And I began to see the benefit of that because I could see the results. At the same time, I fell in love with her. We fell in love, got married, and we've been together as husband and wife and business partners with the Giraffe Heroes Project ever since. But no, Ann started the Giraffe Heroes Project, God bless her, and it's been going now 42 years.
That's amazing. 42 years of it. And, So what are some of the more recent heroes that you can share that to just give us a flavor of these people that you find that are helping others or sticking their necks out, as you said?
Yeah, funny you should ask that. I actually dialed up a couple of them. These are just what do you call them? Snippets.
Yes.
Here's one that's a South African guy in Cape Town, South Africa. Colin Orense champions the powerless, the elderly, the homeless, and the poor. He's fought their evictions from affordable homes, and he's fighting the destruction of neighborhoods by a planned highway. Exposing corruption in the police force has brought him threats from both the police and the criminals paying them off. There's another one. Colette Pichon Battle, he did it, left a career as a corporate attorney after Hurricane Katrina devastated her childhood home, her home ground in rural Louisiana. Her new work is helping people without wealth deal with the threat of the climate crisis. Her nonprofit Taproot Earth trains endangered communities and lobbies for the policies and funding that are needed for survival. I'll give you one more here. Where is it? Oh, yeah. Lisa and Freddie McMillan own Drexel and Honeybees, a lunch place in Bruton, Alabama, that has a menu with no prices on it because nobody needs to pay. The McMillans run the place on his military pension and grants that she secures when she's not lobbying at the state capitol and in Washington, D.C., insisting that legislators remember the poor. The McMillans never forgot them, starting their workday at 6 a.m., making over 100 meals a day, etc., etc. Anyway, there's 1,500 stories like that.
Yeah.
And I urge your listeners and viewers to go on to giraffe.org, giraffe spelled like the animal, .org. And at the top nav bar, you'll see a way to navigate to our library of 1,500 stories. And they're incredible. Each is more inspiring than the one before. So we get stories out there. We get them out on our own website. We get them out on social media. We're now making a major pitch to get them to younger people through TikTok and Instagram.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to just share. I'm going to share your website here real quick because I do want people to see it. I want them to know when they get on it, they're at the right place. And, the Giraffe Heroes Project is really something that, there are just so many stories. You've been at this, like you said, for 40 plus years, finding these people that are sticking their necks out there, doing good things in the world. And it's just, we do not hear enough about this. And if people are listening today, they want to learn more about it, go to giraffe.org and check it out. Cause this is the real deal. Just like you lived the real life up to this point and continue living it, helping people and being of service. You're sharing the stories of the people that are doing, like you said, the people in Alabama with no prices on the restaurant. And so many others that are standing up to what they see as wrong or unfortunate for people, and really helping to make a difference.
Yeah. No, I urge you. I couldn't. I repeat what you've just said. We want more people to come, and we want you to tell us who might be a hero. And we're a nonprofit too, so please sign in and join the Giraffe Project, and maybe give us a few bucks when we send you a letter. But that's not my main purpose. Really, I want you to see that website that Damon just showed you.
Well, the thing is, John, is you said it a while ago, and your wife Ann saw this back in the 80s.
Yeah.
We see the news all day long telling us all the crap that we don't want to hear is happening in the world. And there are so many good things happening, and we need to see more of this. We need to hear more of this because there's great little things happening right down the street from you, in the house next to yours, in the apartment next to yours, and across the world from you. And we got to look at that because it's not all bad.
I want to emphasize that there are two main criteria to become a giraffe hero. And the first is that you stick your neck out. And the second is that you be doing something for the common good. And that's about it. So there's a lot of things you can do to take a risk. You can take a financial risk, for example. You can take a corporate risk by calling out an unethical practice in your company, or an unethical hiring practice in your company, or your company going down the wrong path in terms of issues like sustainability, and then you can make a fuss. You can try and change that, even though you may risk a promotion. I mean, or you can be. We risk some of our giraffe heroes are kids. I mean, like 10, 12 years old. And for a kid, I mean, the risks are a little bit different because they're not adults. But standing up to bullies, for example, and insisting that your school start a student court or something like that to deal with a bullying problem, or maybe cleaning up a polluted lake in your town, and getting the adults around you to help do it.
Yeah.
All that kind of stuff. And then also at the other end of it, there are some really hard-ass giraffes that are doing stuff that you wonder they're still alive. Oh, this one story impresses me. This happened not 2 or 3 months, but it still impresses me. A woman in Western Uganda. Now, I don't know how many people listening to this are aware, but the situation of women in a lot of African countries is really bad. They have very few rights in some of these countries. Some of them are subject to the worst kind of persecution, including physical mutilation, and it's really awful. And it's all pushed by a tremendously patriarchal tribal society, which has been in place for like millennia. So anyway, this woman in Western Uganda is going to villages and telling women about the rights they have, because they don't know. The women don't know. They're just subject to all this shit. Excuse me, all this stuff, and they don't know. And she's telling them that they have rights and to fight back. And if the tribal chief moves in a direction to squash any kind of rights, well, then fight him back, fight back. So, and then she spends a third of her time or so in the capital, Kampala, lobbying the government for new rules in the Constitution, and she's been successful. There's some new rules and new rules in Uganda that help protect women's rights. So now her job is to get women to vote and to run for office and to take women's power seriously, and to get the men to take women's power seriously. Obviously, the tribal chiefs hate her for this, and her life is totally at risk. But she keeps going back into these tribal villages, talking to women, urging them to vote, urging them to push back against the relentless tribal oppressions. So anyway, I love that story just because.
Yes.
Oh man, how can you be doing that, Jesus?
Yes, and
but a lot of people like that.
Yeah, and it's a normal person doing extraordinary things. You said, sticking their neck out, continuing to do it, even though it's a risky endeavor, but they know it's right.
It's interesting because I take a leaf from Giraffe's book in all of my speeches and interviews and stuff, and because I ask these giraffes, why do you do it? And I ask myself, why do I do what I do? Why did I risk my job to end apartheid in South Africa? Why do I? And the answer comes back very clearly, and it's this: every single one of us, every single human being, there's one thing we all want, and that's to live a life with meaning. We want to look at what looks back at us from the mirror in the morning and know that we're on the planet for a reason, that our lives count. And that's really important. And I keep saying that, and everybody agrees. No one disagrees with that. The question is, how do you find that meaning? Now, I found that meaning for first third of my life out of adventure. I have plenty of contacts, some of my friends, who are finding that meaning now through making a whole lot of money and gaining positions of power. Well, bless them, that's fine. I'm a capitalist myself. But I keep telling them, like, look, as long as you think that meaning comes from maximizing third quarter earnings, you're in for a real disappointment, because it doesn't last for very long. You got to find something that makes your life meaningful, so that when you do look at that face looking back from you in the mirror, you know that you're here for a purpose that makes sense with your deepest values. So look around, assess your skills, look around at your contacts. You don't have to leave corporate life. I keep telling the business audiences I work with, which are many, I says, please, please, I'm not suggesting that you become Mother Teresa, sackcloth and ashes, and leave your government career and start, handling on the streets and giving the money to the poor. No, no, no. You can be a giraffe hero and be a corporate titan, as far as I'm concerned. It's just that it's just why you do things. If, for example, you're in a company in a leadership position, and you realize that in that company, using your skills and using your resources and your contacts, that you can get that company to do a better job on making a better product, selling it at a fairer price, and using sound environmental standards, then that's a service. That's meaning. Or if your company is not a good neighbor in your community, maybe it pollutes the local stream or something or whatever, then get your company to be a corporate good neighbor. Get your company to care about, for example, using some of its resources to start non-carbon emitting buses on the city streets or something.
Yeah.
Your company can make a difference. Yeah, I mean, you may take a bit of a loss, but you probably won't, because people see what you're doing and they're more likely to buy your product. So it's not like you're definitely going to take a corporate hit by being a good guy. That's not the way it works. So I'm constantly talking to business people and getting them to join me to tell other business people that, yeah, it's true. That third quarter earnings are important. Our company has to survive, for God's sake, or I'm an entrepreneur and I got to spend every bit I got and every bit of attention to getting this thing off the ground. I understand that. Of course, I understand that. I'm just saying that as soon as you can, reorient what you're doing in the business so that at least part of that energy and part of that resources goes into making your community, your planet, the world a better place. And that's my message. That's my message. And some people shrug their shoulders and say, boy, are you naive? A whole lot more people say, I'm going to think about that. And a lot of them do. I can't tell you how many business people, sometimes 2 or 3 years later, it's really funny. This is just one story out of many. I gave a talk in which I expressed these thoughts to a bunch of high-priced lawyers in Seattle, big-time law firm. And I got polite applause at the end of it, And then about 3 years later, I get this email from someone who had been there at that talk. And he said, Dick, I haven't talked to you in 3 years, but I was there that lunch when you gave that speech. And I ended up leaving the law firm, and I started a firm to save the redwoods in Northern California. And now my whole life is devoted to the environmental concerns in the redwood areas of Northern California. And I've never been happier. And I just wanted to thank you.
Yeah.
There we are.
Yeah. And, you can see that. I agree 100%. And I was the same way years ago, thought that, that corporate, driving profits and doing those kind of things, but it is something that personally left me empty. And when you can start to really care about people, care about your community, and do the right thing, it doesn't cost any more money to do the right thing. It doesn't cost any more money. In the long run, it usually actually makes you more money by doing the right thing, because people see and understand that you're doing the right thing, and they want to be around people that do that. Yeah. And I love what you're doing, John. You guys at the Giraffe Heroes Project is so cool. And I just want to say one more time, because we are getting close to time, we have to wrap up. If anyone is listening and you want to learn more about the Giraffe Heroes Project, where they're highlighting ordinary people sticking their neck out and doing extraordinary things for the common good, just go to giraffe.org. Like the animal, giraffe.org. You can see over 1,500 stories. Ann and John have been at this for 40 plus years, highlighting great people, helping this cause. So get out there to giraffe.org and take a look at it. If you can, hit that donate button and help them highlight more people. John, what we're going to wrap up in a few minutes, but I want you to tell us a little bit about your TikTok videos, because you got badass granddad TikTok videos, and we got to talk about that for a minute.
I thought you were never going to ask. Yeah. I'm having so much fun doing this. I realized that so much of what I was doing was oriented toward adults, and that I was missing out on reaching people that really needed to be reached, which is people in their 20s. So I started a whole series of 3-minute videos, and I put them up on TikTok and on Instagram. Each video goes for about 2 minutes, in which I start by telling a story of one of my adventures, including some of the ones I've told you about today. Then about the 2-minute mark, I segue into some life lessons from that adventure. The life lesson might be about courage or leadership or decision making or whatever, but it's a life lesson related to the video. And after being on the edge of their seat with the adventure story, the kids are hanging in there for the rest of the last minute. And the last 15 seconds is a call to action. And I'm having great fun doing it. I'm getting an enormously positive response. The producers of the show, which, as you say, is called Badass Granddad, 2 Ds, Badass Granddad. Look for TikTok primarily, but it's also on Instagram. And I've done, I've done 15 of them so far. My aim is to do at least 100, assuming that TikTok isn't disappeared by next January. And so, yeah. Oh, and also, while I'm in the promotional stage, take a look also at my memoir, which is full of these stories. It's called Quest, Quest, Risk, Adventure, and the Search for Meaning. Get it from your local bookstore or Amazon. Finally, my own website is my name, johngraham.org, and which my whole checkered past is laid out there. Anyway, I guess I've done enough self-promotion, but yeah, the TikTok thing is so much fun. And the producers say it's doing fabulous. I mean, it's been going now for 3 months, and I've gotten somewhere on the order of 65,000 viewers so far.
Oh my goodness.
I guess that's pretty good. I don't know. But mostly what I like are the comments, and some of them are simple, like, boy, I wish I had a granddad like you. But so many of them are like, this is a great story. Really made me think. That's the kind of comment I really like. Really made me think.
That's awesome, dude. That's awesome. Well, John, I just want to say this is an honor to have you here today and talk with you, and to learn more about the Giraffe Heroes Project, how you're helping people, your enthusiasm for highlighting these people, sticking their necks out and really helping others. And I one more time, I want to say, if you haven't heard already, go to giraffe.org, just like the animal, check it out. And look at some of the stories that they're sharing of these people that are just helping other people for the common good. Thanks so much for being here today, John.
Oh, it's my pleasure, and thank you for inviting me.
Yes. Well, I just want to say real quick, Usman, thanks for stopping by today. Great to see you again. And I want to thank everyone who didn't drop a comment. I can see we've got a lot of listeners out there on the board here. Thank you so much on all the different platforms we're out here today. If you came in late, go back and get started. You will not freaking believe John's story. You will not believe the stuff he started out his life doing, and how long and how many people he's been able to highlight and help throughout his life. So get back and check it out. Start at the beginning and listen to it again. John, hang out just for a second. We're going to finish up offline.